This is Impact with Don Wenner. What's up, everyone? Producer Kyle here, and welcome to the latest episode of Impact with Don Wenner. We have an amazing show today. Don sits down with Britnie Turner and her husband, Jeremy Locke, to talk about their mission. Under the umbrella of Britnie's family of companies, Ariel, especially the Ariel Recovery Group, they aren't just impacting lives, they are impacting nations. Britnie founded Ariel in 2009 at the age of 21 with the mission of elevating people and places. Britnie has since formed multiple companies under the Ariel brand, all accelerating the mission by empowering people, sustaining the planet, and utilizing capitalism as a force for good. I don't want to tell you too much more about her story because Britnie tells it so well, and she's living a life with the mission to impact as many people as possible. 3 things that I think listeners will take away from this episode are, number 1, the true power of impact investing. Number 2, Britnie's true rags to riches story and her commitment to conscious business, doing business with a conscious. Number 3, their current mission in Ukraine and how the family of DLP Capital investors stepped up when they were called upon. So with all of that said, let's jump into Don's conversation with Britnie Turner and Jeremy Locke.
All right, Britnie, Jeremy, thank you so much for being on this episode here with us today.
Well, thank you for having us, Don.
Yes, thank you.
So fun. Love everything that you do. So this is a privilege.
Well, thank you.
Very excited. Thank you.
You got some beautiful background behind us. Tell us where you are today.
We do. We are on a private island called the Ariel BVI, Buck Island. And,
Very cool.
And this is one of the coolest real estate projects I've done. And the entire thing is 100% founded on impact. And so today, I'm excited to share with the listeners how you can create assets as a force for good.
I love it. Love it. So speaking of that, and it works out well as you're on the show called Impact here. So I love the tie-in. But, you know, Britnie, we first got connected a few months back, and you were going to come to our event in March that we had just a few weeks back in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, introduced by a good mutual friend, Chris Ryan. And you were going to come kind of tell a bit about your story and about making an impact for good and kind of how you got to where you are of owning this gorgeous private island and so forth. And our plan got a little bit derailed from what we first planned to talk about for really good reason. So let's start there. I mean, so catch us up a little bit. What you've been up to the last, I know, more than a month now. But what have both of you and Jeremy, been doing and working on? And then I definitely want to make sure, so we didn't get a chance to do so then, talk a little about your story, but
Yes.
more. But tell us what you've been up to, and where I know you haven't been hanging out on that beautiful island much of the past month. So tell everybody what you've been doing.
Well, I'm a huge fan of DLP, and I was very excited to meet all of you. So I'm sorry I wasn't there in person, but I did get pulled in to the mission by this hot guy, and it was hard to say no when he asks me to do things, especially when they're an amazingly worthy mission. So I'll let you, my husband, as of January, we just got married.
Congrats.
I will let you talk about what we were out doing.
Yeah, so with the situation now and the war in Ukraine, our second honeymoon was spent over there helping out as best we could, and we feel very honored and grateful to be able to have the skill sets and the network, and with people like DLP and your guys' networks, like it allows us to go out there and to serve, and that's really what we do at Ariel Recovery. I'm a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret. And I went out there with our team, and we went out with a heart to serve to see how we could help Ukraine. And the biggest problem we noticed when we first got out there, and one of the main reasons we went out there, was there's a very large population of orphans in Ukraine. And a lot of these orphans were being threatened not only by the Russian aggression within Ukraine, but also the predators and the terrible, evil people that prey on these situations and find these people in the most desperate times of their lives and bring them into human trafficking. So we went out there to stop and be a block against, as well as be a force for good, and to extract them from these very dangerous war zones and get children away from scenes that a grown-ups shouldn't even see, and get them back to safer areas, and do that with Ukraine's government and with partner NGOs and everybody else that was out there. And like I said, it wouldn't have been possible without donations and everybody supporting us. So it was wonderful. That it was both unfortunate in that Britni wasn't able to attend the event, but it was very fortunate in the fact that that event turned into giving us the ability and the means to go out and serve. And we currently have helped over 1,600 people since we've been out there. And our first mission was March 3rd, which was about a week after the invasion. Yeah. And we've been going ever since, and we are still going right now. I think Britni came in, got me from Ukraine, and just pulled me out of there.
My second trip.
Her second trip out there is like, it's time for you to come back and refit. So that's what we've been up to.
Yeah, it was really a pleasant surprise. You guys surprised us and made the event, picked us as your charity. And, you know, our team was out there within 48 hours of the disaster, and then started planning that mission. And, you know, it's people working together. You know, we say we want to orchestrate more good in our lifetime than anybody else ever has. It's not competition, but we just want to orchestrate good if it comes through us or if it comes through others. And you guys really bolstered the activities that were out there. We were out there saving, you know, 10, 20, 50 at a time. But when you can do hundreds because you actually have the vehicles to make it possible, and you can, you can contract the veterans to be able to come out and like repurpose them into work that they already have all the skills for it. So we've really got an amazing team and operation running out there. And so it's so fun. It's been such a fun journey for me in real estate to think I started this journey with the hope to create cash flow that would buy me the freedom to go live in Africa, when I didn't know God was actually giving me the skills and now the network to be able to do things that affect entire nations. Like nations, guys. If you understand what real estate developers do, is you guys, we plan how humans operate in space, and then we orchestrate jobs and opportunities and housing and families and how life works. Like, we're the backbone of making these kinds of things happen. So if you have a heart to serve, if you have a heart to do missions locally, globally, the way in which you either rehab one house all the way to develop entire cities or nations, like, it is transforming lives. And so if I could pass one thing along, I know I'm jumping ahead, it's that you really do have the power to impact more than you could ever know. I mean, it was a surprise to me once I realized all the skills I had and I got into this work. But looking back even on my life, with the filters of intentionality that you're going to get to discover of your purpose, when you apply your purpose to the way in which you engage your projects, you really can change the world.
I love it. And so I want to dig in there a little bit deeper, but I just want to make sure, because I know people are curious what you're sort of touching on here a little bit. So if you can highlight, what's the name of your ministry again? What's the website? And just throw that out there real quick before I dig into a couple questions there.
Yeah, so we're Aerial Recovery. You can find us at aerialrecovery.com. And what we do is we react and we help after man-made and natural disasters primarily. But we do all this through a filter of understanding and knowing how human traffickers and how other evildoers work. So we go in with highly specialized ex-military, primarily special operators that come in, and we have repurposed veterans such as myself to now have a mission not given to us by the U.S., but given to us by our calling and by God. And that's what we do now, and that's how we are able to serve. And we've been able to do multiple missions, not just Ukraine. We've responded to 5 hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, all sorts of stuff. Afghanistan. Volcanoes. So we've been very blessed to have the people and the means to go out help and serve.
It's awesome. And you touched on some of the amazing things you've done just in the past couple months, pretty humbly there. giving credit which to others, but you said it briefly. There's 1,600 people you've taken out of harm's way, and I think we were talking, backstage, over 700 orphans that you've rescued from harm's way. And can you give a little bit more detail? You told us when we were live together some of the so I'll call intimate details of some of the challenges in getting these children, these orphans, out of harm's way. Can you give a little more detail, a little bit of specifics? Kind of, what does that really mean? What are you really doing on the ground there in Ukraine?
Yeah, so there's a couple stories that come to my mind, and you do have to understand that we're a humanitarian outfit. While our background is military, we're not offensive. We don't carry weapons. What we do is we just plan. We plan well. We use our connections and our experience to get into these dangerous areas. And when I say dangerous areas, I'm talking machine gun fire. I'm talking mortars. I'm talking artillery, cruise missiles, all of these terrible things that we have to find and navigate to get the most innocent of people there are, who have been waiting for someone to come help them, who have been hunkered down in a bunker or in a cellar with their fellow boarding school of orphans and one or two caregivers that are there trying to go out and see what food and water they can bring to them, while they hope that someone comes and gets them before they're swallowed up by the Russian soldiers that come in there. And it's a terrible situation that does not need to happen. And one of the stories that I really remember, it's always kind of rang true to me, is there was a group of 35 that we were after, and they were out near, you probably have heard on the news a lot lately, Mariupol is a really hot area down in the southern part of Ukraine, east of Odessa over there. And as that area started getting surrounded, one of these boarding schools was in a lot of danger. We sent a team out there, and this team went and picked up these 35 kids and started leaving, and the fire and the mortars was so intense that we had to stop the bus, unload the children, put them back into where they thought they were just saved, because that was the safer area than having them in the vehicle. And in that time, it took us 4 days to get back to go get them, because at that time we hadn't been blessed with more donations, and we didn't have enough money to scale. So our vehicle for extraction was pushed away. And unfortunately, 4 of their caregivers had gone out to find supplies for them, and they were cut down and murdered by a Russian squad with a machine gun. And that's something that these children then had to witness and endure before we were able to go back and get them. And we, thank God, were able to get back in there and extract them out of that area and bring them back to the West. But there's hundreds of stories just like that. There's all these circumstances that just really don't need to happen. And I pray and hope that this war stops. And I pray and hope that whatever touches the hearts of the leaders that are involved in this, it changes them, because it's some of the worst things I've ever seen, and I've deployed 7 times.
The last week that I was there, we went all the way basically into Russia on part of it, and it was in Chernihiv. And there was a mom that had been in a basement for 3 weeks with her children, and one of them has Down syndrome and oh my gosh, diabetes. And they've been hiding in this basement because their house got pretty blown up when their neighbor's house was completely blown up. And to see her trying to coax him to get into the vehicle, and he's just screaming and crying and screaming and crying, and just the way she held him, it was like, I'll drive all the way to Russia to come get you, of course, because they were so grateful to just have people who risk their lives to go out there. And it's not like you just get on a road. There's 50 different checkpoints to go through. You have to have a special code word, and we have an agreement with the government to be allowed to do this, because some people are extracting people, but they're doing the wrong thing with them, and like we've talked about. And so heartbreaking to see these people. Obviously, there's so many real heroes doing amazing things for their country, defending them. It's inspiring, but children should not have to be going through this. One of my favorite things he is always explaining is, it's like, I'm messed up from war. All of us are messed up from war. And we're trained grown men that signed up for this and have been trained for 20 years to see it, and still are messed up from war. What about children? And so this is something that's going to go on for a long time. And my thing I want to tell everybody is, like, your calling may not be helping the orphans in Ukraine. It may be the kids in your inner city that you are going to be a great mentor for, or being a youth pastor, or being an amazing mom or dad. Like, what's your thing? And be so confident that that's your calling, and do great at it. There's nothing you should be doing. I like getting the should out of people. Get all the should out of you, and walk in the thing that, in our experience, God is calling you to do, because then you'll have a grace for it. But as you take those next steps, knowing you can do something, you always can do something. And it's your responsibility to get your house in order, and have the money and the freedom and the relationships and the health to be able to be activated. If not, you're just knocking yourself out of the game. If you've got a negative mindset, like, great, you can't help anybody. If the battle's here, you can't even battle anything out here. So you're not serving anyone by playing small. And that's not holy. And that was something I had confused most of my life. And it took a lot for me to actually be able to not self-sabotage in the creation of wealth. But it took me literally responding to a hurricane in 2017 and watching my billionaire neighbors use their resources to save lives and be God's hands and feet, because they walked in an abundance. Didn't hurt them and their families to be able to respond to the call and to fund things and to bring in these things when they were needed. And I committed during the hardest season of my entire life, and I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to have so much more than enough to be able to provide for nations. And if it takes my whole life doing that, I'm going to do it.
Awesome. Really, really incredible. And I want to get to your story a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of tie into some of your message there. So, I've committed and been called to make an impact on 4 crisis and areas where I feel I can leverage my influence and relationships and resources and the platform of DLP. And those are, affordable workforce housing, jobs, what we call the happiness crisis, and what we call the legacy crisis. And so that's where I put a lot of my focus and energy and effort and capital and resources, because those are areas I feel I can influence. But I learned something not too long ago from a gentleman named Lloyd Reeb, who runs an incredible organization called Halftime Institute. And he said he recommends focusing the majority of your resource and your giving on what you've been called to, where you can have a scalable, impactful difference. But to give yourself the freedom to have compassion giving and give when you have the opportunity and the ability to make an impact. When a natural disaster happens, or a situation like you coming into our world a few weeks ago, and it was really funny. So, I knew up until the day, I think, of your presentation a few weeks ago on similar kind of on what you just explained, you were, I think, on your way to Ukraine when you were with us. And Chris Ryan, who invited you to come speak, I didn't know that this was happening until I think the day before, that you weren't going to make it there live. And I thought you were coming in to have a fireside chat about your story. And so Chris says to me, basically a couple minutes before you went up, what was going on, and asked me, hey, would you be open to allowing, us to kind of promote donations? And I said, yes, of course. I knew nothing about what you were going to talk about. I knew nothing about, the orphans in Ukraine. My mind was blown. And then Chris, as he lovingly has done to me multiple times, said, do you have any will you be willing to match the giving? I said, there was no planning to this, right? I had 5 seconds to
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
we didn't.
The question, right? Like he was literally about to tell you that we were going to do this, and asks me this, and I said yes. And he's done this to me before as well, but in the most positive way, right? And then, so what was really cool, it's great peer pressure, right? And what was really cool is after you gave this, some of these really impactful stories, and I think it gave a lot of people, as I think people listening right now, the same a way to make a difference, where we all watch the news and hear about it, but like, who would have thought? I think the number you said was 240,000 orphans in Ukraine. Like, who would have thought? I mean, I never once in my mind even crossed my mind, hey, I wonder if there's orphans in Ukraine who, never even thought about it, right? So it gave people a real way to make a difference. And what I think was so cool about it, after everybody at the audience heard your story and what you were doing and what you were called to do, all of a sudden we started having people stand up and say, I'll donate $10,000, and the next person said, I'll donate $10,000, right? And it was just so amazing to see people instantly. Again, people who also probably didn't have anything in their plan to affect to donate to Ukraine or affect orphans in Ukraine or refugees. Like, nobody was coming into that meeting. Nobody came there to hear a pitch about this or to make a donation. Just people seeing, hey, this is an opportunity that I can have an abundance mindset and make a difference today that wasn't part of any long master plan, but I could do something today. And it was just such an amazing thing to see people step up, and some people, right, $10,000 is a lot of money, right? That's significant amount of money. It is a lot of money, right? It was just so moving to see people just take action so quickly. And it was really, really, really amazing. So I appreciate you for creating that opportunity for myself and for so many of us who got to hear this unbelievable ministry that you guys have been called to be able to make a difference in. It's pretty astounding. So thank you.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. I didn't know you were last minute pulled into it. That's so amazing. So much good from it, and it's still coming from it.
Well, and to that point, I just want to make sure we're clear that a lot of money came in from amazing people, part of the DLP community, and I know you've put that money to work in buying vans and buses and resources for these kids, because not only do you have to get them out, I know now you're feeding them and housing them, and so I assume you don't have so much money that's come in that you're set for the next year, and you don't need our help, right?
Yeah. No, by no means. There's about, just in the Lviv Oblast area, which is one of the states in Ukraine where we primarily operate when we bring them out, there's about 3,000 orphans there now that are in need to make sure that they have shelter, clothing, food, all of those normal supplies. And with just every day, it's a new challenge. There's a new group that needs to be evacuated. There's one group that needs to go from here to there. We just had to repair one of these schools because a cruise missile exploded next to it and blew all the windows out. And so then we went in there and fixed that and helped them fix a shelter so they could get inside of a shelter because of it. So with war, there's all sorts of challenges. And so you really can't predict it. So it's best to be as prepared as possible. And in this case, donations is what helps us prepare. We have the people, we have the purpose, and we have the drive to do it. It's the fuel, and those are the donations. So thank you again for it.
Well, the need is overwhelming, and obviously we're smart about where we go in and repair depending on how the war moves around. But what we don't want to have to say is, no, sorry, we can't go out there, and there's so many people to help. And so a lot of times we don't ask for money, we ask for like resources, but because this is all the way in Ukraine, and people like you and our friends are typically United States or London, it's so much, we can stretch the donor dollar so much more buying things in Poland or Hungary or somewhere closer, and you're not having to buy it and then spend all your money shipping it.
And time.
And so, what we've been able to do is be fast. And that's why the government likes us, is we're fast and effective. And then, people who are getting the reports from the donations is like, you stretched the money how far? And but you're dealing with scrappy people, people who came from nothing. And I started my career living in my car. I know how to make things happen with very little, and you can't be wasteful. And so we feel very very responsible to make sure donor dollars go where they were intended to go. And so I think that we've been very blessed with that approach, and you don't just throw money at stuff and that's one of the differences. We don't throw money at stuff. Like, we are, and that's why I'm so excited to talk to all of you listening to this, is you may be incredibly resourced, but you can still be frontline. Like,
Yeah.
I've got this entrepreneur brain that says, I want to solve this forever. And when I go and we pull a baby out of rubble, the Haiti earthquakes, my brain isn't just saying, let's repair her leg that's dangling off of her. That is an emergency. We have to deal with it. But how do you actually make sure no building ever falls on them ever again, forever? Because millions of people keep being affected by these earthquakes in the same spot. This is not a surprise. How do we fix the problem? And so that's what we need these entrepreneur brains for. You know, if you are military and you're listening to this, please know that your skills are incredibly needed in these austere environments. Oh my gosh, you're so effective. It's been such a joy because I've been doing this for a very long time, but to add him and watch him bring in all these veterans and how just effective they are, it's ridiculous. But everybody can serve a part. So be it your skill sets to your brain, there's billions and billions of dollars of inventions and companies started in these developing nations that would do nothing but wipe out poverty. Now, it's obviously not why I'm there is the money, but I want to tell you that if it's ever been done before, if poverty in part of Florida has ever been solved to where parents don't have to sell their kids into trafficking, then that means it's been done, which means it's been done, which means it's doable, which means we can do it again. And so if you have a mind for business and entrepreneurship and inventions or whatever, you don't even have to invent anything. You can literally just copy and paste something that's worked and do it somewhere else. That's actually one of my favorite Richard Branson quotes. I was sitting on his island and hanging out with him, and somebody said, if you were going to start all the way over again and you lost everything, what would you do? And he said, well, if you want anybody interested in becoming a multimillionaire in a year or less, and everybody raised their hands. And he said, if you want to become a multimillionaire in a year or less, take any successful American company and do it overseas. And he said, I'm going to do cell phones in Saudi Arabia. You think it's going to work? And we're like, yeah. Why? Because cell phones work. Why? Because people like cell phones. It's a great technology. It's a great thing. It's helpful. It's useful. So there's so many ways that you can create value. And it's not about Americanizing anybody. It's about creating the template of what it takes for humans to thrive. You know, education, clean water, good medical help, jobs, safety, good governance. Like, that's a checklist, and it's actually pretty easy to do if you've witnessed it and been part of it being done before. Is it frustrating to try to do somewhere else? Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But if you have the staying power, you can really create great things that solve a lot of problems permanently.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I want to jump here a second, but make sure everybody here, and we'll put it in the show notes. It's aerial recovery. That's AERIAL recovery, and we'll put that in the show. Yeah, that's backwards on the
oh, okay.
Those watching, but for those not watching, aerial recovery. We'll put in all the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Thank you,
and encourage you to participate. But I know people listening here, and I have no doubt people are going to be called as I have been to help. But to kind of, I think your bigger message there is it's amazing what we can do above and beyond, donations, right? And people can, and not everybody can see, a lot of people are listening, but so anybody who can't see Jeremy and Britni, they're both in their 30s, young, right? Didn't come from wealth, and are making an impact on nations, as Britni said. And it's easy when you hear people doing really big and amazing things, say, oh, I can't do that. I don't have those resources. I don't have the knowledge. That's not possible. And I'd love if you could, and we didn't get a chance to do this kind of a few weeks back, tell a little bit about your story. And because I know this isn't, you didn't come out of the, born with this expectation or with a trust fund to be able to go and donate and make a difference, some sort of advantage that you've had. So I'd love just if you could explain a little bit about how you got to doing this here and impacting thousands of children's lives. And I know it's only going to grow in the impact you have in the years and decades together ahead, especially now that you guys are working on this together. So if you can give a little bit about the backstory would be awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to be a missionary in Africa since I was 12. And that became my identity. That was what I was going to go get training for so I could be effective. And so I grew up what I would call America poor, which is, it's poor, but
Sure.
by comparison. So I didn't know anybody wealthy. I never knew or understood that world, except for what Disney taught me, is that all rich people are bad guys. And so they're the bad guys. So I would work 5 jobs at a time so I could go on these mission trips every summer. And I was the worst missionary, in my opinion, because you're supposed to have this big, holy, happy experience where your life's changed and you hold the babies. And I was just mad. And I'm like, golly, Britni, like, why are you so mad the whole time? And I was mad because I kept seeing suffering and I wasn't really fixing it. And I was so upset that innocent people were going through these terrible things. And that was their life every day. And though we were feeding people today or building a school or whatever we were doing, it wasn't fixing the problem. And when I was 17, I met a little girl that had been sexually abused. And because of that abuse as an infant, she couldn't speak. And that was like the most pivotal moment of my entire life. And I want you all to think about your life. Like, when was the moment you saw something you can't unsee? It doesn't mean I had to be trafficked to do something. You don't have to have been. You could just be infuriated or saddened by something that you say, I refuse to live in a world where this is socially acceptable and or happening a lot, and I do nothing. Because I believe you have 3 options when you see these things. You can ostrich. You can be the person that just hides your head in the sand and says, I just can't hear about that. It just so upsets me. Or you can say, I'm going to become a hater activist and just fight it online. Or you can create a better system that makes the old one obsolete. So the day I met that little girl, I went back to my tent sobbing when I found out that 1 out of every 4 children were killed or died before they turned 1 from sexual abuse in this region. And the sexual abuse was from their father. And it was just understood as that happens. And it's mind-boggling to us to think that that's normal certain places, but that is. And it's terrible. And like we live in a world in these countries, like I spend 40% of my time, he spends 60% of his time in these nations where atrocities are normal. And so don't think that this is one place. This happens all over the world. And so when I found out that 1 out of every 4 of these babies die before they turn 1, and it was understood as normal, I said, God, whatever it looks like, use me. Like, what it looks like, please help me make this not a thing. And I remember that moment like it was a second ago, because it was so powerfully consuming the commitment in my heart to figuring that out. And I heard him say loud and clear, I've only heard God a couple times in my life, but this one was, I'm going to take you out of the mission field and I'm going to put you in business. And I was like, no, immediately. Nope. Okay. Here, I prayed this prayer, but no, I don't like the path you just said for me, because I thought business was boring. And I, trained to be this hardcore missionary, and I went through survival school, and I planned to move to Africa the next year. And like, everybody knew me as the girl that was going to go do that. And so the lesson there is, when are we letting what we've told people our plan is and what our identity is be more important to us than the path we starts to set us on? You raise your hand and you say you want to be used, and when it's time to actually walk in it, we're worried about what other people are going to say about us. Well, you said you were, so sometimes you've got to Noah's Ark that ish, which is be willing to look crazy, do things that take way longer than you want them to. And yet in the end, 120 years later, you look like a genius and you save all of humanity. You never know, but you have to just walk this walk of faith. So I thought that this was going to be easy, because I was trained growing up that if you were in God's will, that the Red Sea would just part for you and it was just going to be this easy thing. If God's in it, the door just opens. Bull crap. I just want to tell you all, that's absolutely bull crap. Don't get confused when it's hard, because that doesn't mean God's not in it. That just means you don't know what you're doing and you're new. And so a lot of times we say things are hard when we're just not educated. So I decided to buy my first house at 18 because this guy came into my school and he taught about how you can build cash flow. And then if you have enough cash flow coming in, you can live in Africa and you don't have to ask anybody else for money. And I was like, okay, well, I guess that means I'll have some resources, because again, at 17, when I prayed that prayer, I had no money, no influence, no network. How are you really going to change a culture in what they think is okay if you have none of those? So if you really do have this passion and you are excited to change the world, get your crap together. Seriously, I know people aren't talking like this because the compassionate people don't talk like this, but let's just be real. Let's stop wishing and hoping that we're going to make a difference in our lifetime and then you have a midlife crisis because you didn't do anything. You're too poor to help people wanted to help. You have no resources to be able to take anybody in. You're just have enough for me and my family. Like, I want to tell you, that's not holy. It sounds good, but to peasants, if all you can provide for is yourself and your family, like, you're kind of not good for the rest of the community. Like, that's not cool. So fix that in your mind, rework this. It's holy to be poor. It's holy to have your stuff not own you and you own your stuff. May that be a truth in your life, but it's not holy to be poor. And so I bought that house, thought it would be an open road, and I bought it in a really good year to get into real estate. If you remember, it was 2007. And in the process of buying it, I heard about flipping houses, and I thought that, wow, this is a way I can start accumulating cash to then buy assets, to then be able to fund orphanages. And I ended up struggling for 3 years, end up renting my house out to the guys on Craigslist, taking a job that was $600 less than the minimums on my credit card. And I was going to go learn how to flip houses from this guy in Nashville. And my family hadn't talked to me in almost 2 years because they didn't go to college. And again, everything I touched just, it's like the opposite of Midas touch, just became like an abysmal failure. But I was excited to move to Nashville, and this was God opening the door. And within 60 days, I get fired, and the first month's rent check bounced on my tenants. And so I've got a mortgage, I've got no money, I've got all this debt. So I move into my car, and I end up working for free for almost a year. But in that year of working for free, I learned that freaking business. And I want to tell you all who think you got to get rich on every deal, that find really good partners and like offer to just be the one that does everything and get in there and learn in a safe environment. Make nothing on the first couple deals. Let everybody else make all the money. You just get to ask questions in a safe environment. And that's the best advice I can impart to people wanting to get into real estate, is find a way to be useful, be around people doing it, serve their mission, be of value, and don't ask for anything. Because when, again, don't be weird and use them and become some crazy competition. But like when it comes time to do it on your own, you've worked to learn, not just to earn, and nobody can take that education out of you. And real estate, there's a lot of highs and lows, and there's a lot of money you can lose. And so one experience from the right mentor can transform your career. And so I finally did get to do my first house by myself. And I'm skipping through, like, it's kind of a hellish road. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was full of hard times. People who look like me also aren't the ones doing these projects. So that means if I don't look like the kind of person that does it, that means you're unsafe, which means invest in you. You know, like, banks aren't just like, please let me give a 21-year-old girl $1 million to go lead a construction team. But I didn't become a victim because I'm a woman and I'm young or whatever the crap. I just had to work 10 times harder. So if you don't look the part, suck it up and just know that you'll have to work 10 times harder to prove that someone who looks like you is trustworthy with the money. But then you're opening the door for the next person that looks like you, and the next person and the next person, because humans need to see it done. We're all wired with the survival mentality. And so I went from living in my car to becoming the Forbes fastest growing woman-owned and woman-led company in the world within, I don't know, like 6 years. I've won every award except for Entrepreneur of the Year. Dang it, I'm going to win that someday. I've won Fortune like number 3 in the entire United States for fastest man and woman urban company, fastest growing. Scaled rapidly, and that scaling really didn't happen until I went back to Africa and I saw that my real estate skills were what wiped out sex trafficking in a community. When we tied up land and did strategic things to build an orphanage, it created all these jobs, and all these people now had opportunity. And so I know we're about out of time, but I want to impart to our listeners that, be it your business, be it your influence, be it your assets, like, stop for a second, close your eyes or ask your team and get in front of a whiteboard and say, what have I been entrusted with? And how can I use it to be a blessing to others? You know, I always say, how can you be a force for good in every part of your life? And if you've been given something, once you're a good steward of it, you will be given more. And it's not for more sake, because there's, you know, blessings and problems that come with all of that. But you do have one chance in this earth. Be intentional. Stop wasting time. Stop living a life escaping. Be intentional with your relationships, your body, your mind, your assets. And you have no idea how fulfilling and fun life can be, even with the obstacles that you face.
Awesome. Incredible. So a couple things to wrap up with from what you said there. A book I would love to recommend to you guys if you haven't read it, but everybody else who's listening, by Timothy Keller. It's called Every Good Endeavor. It's an awesome book that helps you rethink about the relationship between money and being a good Christian follower and leader, and using the resources and abilities that have been gifted upon us. And I think it does a really great job of reframing that mindset that money and being successful is against God's will. So I really recommend that. And then to a lot of what you were saying, what I kept going to is so I finished a number of kind of keynote presentations I've done with this video. And in this video, it's by a Christian singer named Matthew West, and it's called "I Created You." And the song starts off with Matthew, the singer, saying, God, why do you let these terrible things happen, right? Why do you let, example, sex trafficking happen, right? Why do you let these natural disasters happen? God, why don't you do something about it? And that he's like, in prayer, pleading to God, why don't you do something about these crises, these terrible things that happen in the world? And God answers him, and God says, I did. I created you. And the great quote that song always makes me think about is, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? It's amazing time to make a difference right now. So really appreciate you, Britni, Jeremy. Awesome job, awesome work you're doing. Aerial Recovery, we'll get that information out. Please help them continue their mission, and look forward to getting a chance to talk again and see you both soon.
Thank you very much.
This has been Don Wenner on the Impact Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. You can check out our other episodes by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube, or check us out online by going to impactwithdon.com. I encourage and challenge you to make an impact.